Standing in front of Beeston Hill, the Cheshire landscape unfolds much as it did when George Stubbs came here in the early 1760s. He came here to paint a hunting picture for Richard, the young first Earl of Grosvenor. The Grosvenor hunt, as the picture is known, is large. It measures 8 feet by 5 foot high. But it seems larger than that. Sir Alfred Munnings once described it as 15 feet long and almost as high. Stubbs was already a mature sporting artist when he painted it. But curiously, it's one of his very rare hunting pictures. But as the late Basil Taylor, to whom we owe so much for re-establishing Stubbs's importance, has said in his book, if one had to choose a single painting by which to represent Stubbs' gifts most fully, the choice could well be the Grosvenor Hunt. Stubbs seems to have been a strong-willed, almost obstinate man, resilient in mind and body, as this squared-up preparatory drawing seems to suggest. Today, we would call him a loner, given to rigorous self-discipline in pursuit of his current obsession, whether it be the dissection of a horse or the perfection of enamel painting on Wedgwood's ceramic panels. Stubbs was born in Dale Street, Liverpool, in 1724. He was apprenticed at the age of 15, but seems to have largely been self-taught as a portrait painter. As a young man, he practiced in Wigan and Leeds. His early interest in anatomy gave him a vile renown in York, where he etched the illustrations to John Burton's Essay Towards a Complete New System of Midwifery, published in 1751. Then, in 1754, he went to Rome, where he took lodgings in the Piazza di Spagna, which also contained the English coffee house in the far corner. Richard Wilson, the Welsh landscape painter, was in Rome at the time, but the abiding effect upon Stubbs seems to have come from a slight study he made of ancient Roman animal sculpture, which he later used in his history pictures. His trip to Rome was probably paid for by the Nelthorpe family of Lincolnshire. And it was in Lincolnshire in 1758 that he began dissections and drawings for The Anatomy of the Horse, the publication which was eventually to make his name. In 1759, he came to London in search of an engraver and publisher. The Anatomy of the Horse, with its masterly plates, both a scientific and artistic achievement, was finally published in 1766. Stubbs' arrival in London from the north could not have been at a more opportune time. His arrival, like that of Robert Adam, the Scottish architect, coincided with one of the greatest periods of the English country estate. It was a time when the organization of country pursuits, like hunting, became more formal. Horse racing, too, with the founding of the Jockey Club about 1750, began to resemble the turf as we know it today. Racehorses, like this string exercising at Goodwood, were painted by Stubbs for Charles Lennox, 3rd Duke of Richmond, seen here with his Duchess and his sister-in-law, Lady Louisa Lennox. This was one of the first works executed by Stubbs after his move south. He spent 9 months at Goodwood, working on a series of paintings depicting country pursuits for the Duke of Richmond. Of course, there was an established tradition for painting this kind of subject. The work of artists of the previous generation, like Button and Tillemans, or James Seymour, whose Ashdown Kill is seen here, is marked by a certain naivety and dependence on established forms. Stubbs's hunting picture in the Goodwood series, probably painted in 1760, with its over-tall proportions and rather awkward poses, shares some of these characteristics. It in no way prepares us for the magnificent Grosvenor hunt of 2 years later. The pack and the hunt enter swiftly from the right, slowing to a turn before an old, curved oak. The hounds throw themselves in the water to pursue the stag, Stubbs anticipating the findings of high-speed photography in the way in which he's painted the droplets of water. The hunt includes portraits of Lord Grosvenor's brother, the Honourable Thomas Grosvenor, his friends Sir Roger Mostyn, and Mr. Bell Lloyd. But just look at the way in which Stubbs focuses attention on Richard, the young Earl, huntsman, horse breeder, and patron of the arts. He's no larger or seemingly more important than the others, but he's seen in full from the side, pointing with his whip. This is the whole fulcrum of the picture, and it is here at the foot of the oak that Stubbs has signed and dated the painting 1762. Directly above, on this line, Stubbs has painted, a subtle point this, the sunlight reflected in a single window of a distant cottage. Now this line occurs at a point roughly 2/3 from the right-hand edge of the canvas, and it's in a proportion to the whole width, which is known to artists as the golden section. The Grosvenor Hunt is one of those rare paintings which seems to use sound. Look at the huntsman entering from the right with his hand cupped to his ear. The whipper in with the horn over his shoulder in the foreground. One can almost hear the clatter as the jumping horse in the background touches the top bar of the gate. The sense of sound is particularly important in the splendid figure in the green coat on a grey in the left-hand corner of the painting. Not only is he larger than the other figures, but in stopping, with his diagonal accents, the headlong rush of hunt and pack, he sounds a blaring, brassy note on his horn, which we can almost hear. Stubbs has pointed the bell of the horn towards us over the huntsman's shoulder. There is no escaping it. It echoes visually the horn of the huntsman on the other bank and reaffirms the vigorous, complex, inner dynamics of the painting. Stubbs was never again to attempt a painting so complex and so carefully constructed as his early masterpiece, The Grosvenor Hunt. Instead, he went on to paint a series of calm, serene, frieze-like paintings of mares and foals, which are one of his most original contributions to the development of animal painting. This is typical of the work which Stubbs continued to exhibit throughout the 1760s at the Society of Artists. One could also add that he was never to paint such a conventional picture again, and with the exception of the double portrait of Gimcrack, he never painted the finish on the racecourse, so beloved by his successors. And there is some truth in Henry Fuseli's observation that his skill in comparative anatomy never suggested to him the propriety of style in forms. Stubbs was unconventional. He had no time for the proprieties, and went his own original way, neither following the classical examples of antiquity nor the romantic painters' attempts to give their horses human emotions. Stubbs was essentially a detached, realistic observer with an intuitive sense of design, neither classic nor romantic, nor exclusively a zoological draftsman, a sporting artist, or even a history painter. He fitted into none of the academic categories of the 18th century. After a period in vogue in the 1760s, he fell almost totally out of fashion in the early 19th century. And it has been left to the 20th century with its lack of interest in the proprieties, but its taste for the abstract elements of design, to appreciate Stubbs once again for his true, unquenchable originality.
The great painting next Monday at 7:30 is The Burning of the Houses of Parliament by Turner, his dramatic record of the historic happening of October 1834. In half an hour, Horizon reports on new research which suggests that professional